Chapter 10. Robin Hood. More than 800 years ago, there lived a king in England whose name was Richard. He was also called the Lionheart. He went abroad for a long time to fight great wars. And while he was away, the land was ruled by his brother, Prince John. John was a cruel and tyrannical man. He appointed men just like himself on the positions of power throughout the country. One of his favorites was the Sheriff of Nottingham. Thirsty for riches and power, the sheriff controlled Nottinghamshire with an iron hand. He burdened the poor peasants with harsh taxes, and if they could not pay, his soldiers would turn them out of their homes and farms. The only man who stood up against the sheriff was the Saxon, Earl of Huntingdonshire. He was such a thorn in the sheriff's flesh. The Prince John outlawed him. Then the Earl set up a camp in a secret glade in the heart of a huge forest and gathered around him a band of men dedicated to fighting injustice and determined to do whatever they could to help the peasants. The forest was Sherwood Forest, and the Earl was none other than Robin Hood. Robin Hood was one of the best swordsmen in the lands, and his fame as an archer was widespread. No one could match his gift of leadership, his courage, and his cheerfulness. The sheriff hated and feared Robin Hood. He longed to capture Robin and see him hanging long from his gallows. Over and over again, he thought that he would capture the Saxon, dead or alive. But Robin had many friends who were determined that what may come, the sheriff would never succeed. It happened one springtime that the Mayfair was to be held on the town meadow at Nottingham. The Mayfair was a great event. Everyone from miles around liked to go to it. There were competitions for shooting arrows, for wrestling, for climbing slippery poles, for baking the best cakes and making the sweetest jams and tastiest pickles, and many more. There was a custom for crowning of the May Queen, and there were many stalls selling fine and useful wares. The news of colorful attractions and royal arrangements of the Mayfair reached the ears of Robin Hood, so much so that even his band liked to go to the fair. They were after all human beings who deserved to participate in all the social activities. How could they stop themselves from enjoying the fair? How can we attend the fair without getting trouble from the sheriff and his men? Said Robin Hood. Then a sweet smile played on his lips. I have a plan. The morning of the long-awaited fair came, and Robin and his men walked to the edge of Nottingham. Robin stood looking at the castle. You all stay here until you see the sheriff and his men riding away from the town, said Robin. Then you will know that it is safe to go to the fair and enjoy wholeheartedly. The other outlaws stared at Robin in surprise. The sheriff and his men will never leave Nottingham on the day of the fair, they said. They know that we would like to go to the fair. They will be keeping special watch and hoping to catch us. Robin pulled a disguise over his Lincoln green clothes and smiled. Leave everything to me, he said, and left the forest immediately. A little while later, an archer hastened to the sheriff's room. At that time the sheriff was sitting at his table plotting with his captain of the guards. My lord, the archer gasped, there is an old beggar at the gate asking if King Richard is here yet. The sheriff stared in surprise. King Richard is in the Holy Land, he snapped. Why does a beggar ask if he is here? My lord, went on the archer, the beggar says that everyone coming along the main highways narrates that King Richard has come back to England in disguise as a monk. He is riding from castle to castle, seeking for an accounting of taxes collected while he has been away. At this moment he is riding towards Nottingham. The beggar asked if the king is here yet, as he wishes to pay his respects. The sheriff turned pale with fear. He leaped to his feet and ordered his horse to be saddled. He called his soldiers together and said, "We must ride to meet the king with a large escort to do him honor time. The king must not think we are showing any disrespect." So the sheriff and his men rode swiftly out of Nottingham. The beggar who really tricked the sheriff and threw away the thorn from his path was Robin Hood in disguise. He stood with his merry men to watch the sheriff go. A great problem has been solved with a little trick. All the outlaws laughed joyfully. The outlaws went into the town and had a fine day at the Mayfair. They enjoyed the game to their heart's content. And by the time the sheriff realized that King Richard had not returned and that he had been tricked by Robin Hood, the fair was over. How everyone else laughed at furious sheriff, only he knew it. Glossary: tyrannical, bad, cruel, outlawed, to make something illegal. Gallows, a structure to hang people, criminals, wares, things that somebody is selling. Band, group of people. Holy Land, Palestine. Peasants, workers. Glade, clear space in the forest. Disguise, vague, unrecognizable. Outlaw, bad element.